We'll see if anybody is waiting. And Zachary, you can use the chat feature if you wanted to, and you could choose to all panelists and attendees. You could write a message in there, a welcome message, or, you know, if anyone has a technical difficulty, they could respond in there.
Okay. All right. So I look
Zach,
like we have,
do you have your panelist, your participant window open?
I have a participants window. Yes, and I see introduce vendors for transportation technology and specialized vehicles and answer as many questions as we have time for. And so thank you all for being here. If we could go to the next slide. So just a few housekeeping notes to start off with. First, a copy of this PowerPoint presentation will be made available online. Everyone except for presenters is muted, but there are a few ways to participate for the question and answer portions of the workshop. To speak, use the raise hand feature in Zoom by either clicking the icon in the Zoom toolbar or entering *9 for those joining by phone. You may also use the Q&A chat box feature to submit questions. Next slide. So we'll be covering a lot of ground today. So to make sure that we stay on schedule, we'll respond to questions primarily during the Q&A portions of the workshop. If you have access to the Q&A chat box feature in Zoom, you may use it to ask questions at any point during the workshop. We will try, but may not have time to respond to all questions. We will compile all questions raised during the workshop, posting responses via an FAQ page, frequently asked questions page, on the STGP Cycle 11 webpage. After the workshop, for unanswered grant application questions, you may email grantsdistribution@sandag.org. For unanswered flexible fleet questions, you may email my colleague, Crystal Ayala, or the flexible fleet providers. For unanswered vehicle vendor questions, you may contact the vehicle vendors directly. Contact information is listed in the agenda. Lastly, if you experience technical difficulties during the workshop, you can try closing out and rejoining. If that does not work, you may rejoin via phone. Phone numbers are also listed in the agenda. So any questions so far on the housekeeping items? I don't see any hands raised. So I think we will continue on. So to get started, let me first note that all information presented through this workshop is available on the STGP Cycle 11 webpage. This includes application materials as well as the STGP overview document. Additionally, the STGP webpage provides more detailed information on the grant program, including the 2020 Draft Program Management Plan, or PMP, and other grantee resources. We can go to the next slide, please. SANDAG encourages prospective applicants to review the PMP as it is a comprehensive guide on how SANDAG administers the grant program. All right, next slide, please. Through the STGP, SANDAG currently distributes funds from two funding sources: Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, Section 5310 program, and Transnet Senior Mini Grant Program. The federal Section 5310 program funds specialized transportation projects that serve seniors age 65 and over and individuals with disabilities in the urbanized areas of San Diego County. It is based on formula funding, meaning that San Diego's apportionment is based on the number of seniors and individuals with disabilities who reside here per the census. For the Cycle 11 call for projects, SANDAG will disperse Section 5310 funding from federal fiscal years 2019 and 2020 that was already apportioned to the San Diego region. For this reason, SANDAG does not expect any change to Section 5310 funding due to COVID-19. Approximately $4.2 million in Section 5310 funding is available. The Senior Mini Grant Program funds specialized transportation projects that serve seniors age 60 and over throughout San Diego County. The Senior Mini Grant Program is funded through Transnet, the half-cent sales tax for local transportation projects. Senior Mini Grant funding for the Cycle 11 call for projects is based on future estimated sales tax revenue from fiscal years 2022 and 2023. For this reason, SANDAG anticipates Senior Mini Grant funding to decrease from approximately 3.6 to 3.0 million due to actual and forecasted reductions in sales tax revenue caused by COVID. So together, SANDAG anticipates making approximately 7.2 million available through the Cycle 11 call for projects, but note that funding levels are subject to change due to COVID-19 or for other reasons. You can go to the next slide. So proposed specialized transportation projects should align with STGP program goal and objectives. The program goal is to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities throughout the region by removing barriers to transportation services, expanding transportation mobility options, and providing transportation services that meet the special needs of seniors and individuals with disabilities. Next slide. There are also 4 program objectives, which strive to 1, fund projects derived from either the very high or high priority strategies outlined in the coordinated plan. 2, fund innovative and flexible programs. 3, fund and provide incentives for coordination among specialized transportation providers. And 4, encourage cost-efficient service provision. Next up is eligibility. So eligibility information is included in the overview document and summarized in the program goal, objectives, and eligibility and evaluation criteria document, which are all available on the Cycle 11 STGP webpage. Starting with Senior Mini Grant, eligible applicants include private nonprofit organizations, state or local governmental authorities, including tribal governments, operators of public transportation, and social service agencies. Please note that private does not mean for-profit. For-profit organizations can apply for funds to support operating and mobility management projects. They can, however, apply for funds to support capital projects. Eligible projects include senior shuttles, travel training programs, volunteer driver programs, non-emergency medical transportation, mobility management, and the brokerage of multi-jurisdictional transportation services. Please also note that Section 5310 and Senior Mini Grant applicants are required to submit at least 1 service area map. If you are proposing 2 or more projects that have different service areas, you may choose to show all service areas on 1 map or provide multiple maps. Next slide. So now moving on to the Section 5310 program. Per FTA requirements, eligible Section 5310 applicants and projects are split into 2 categories, traditional and non-traditional projects. So first, traditional. Traditional Section 5310 projects include vehicle procurement, support equipment such as computer hardware or software, intelligent transportation systems and dispatch systems. Could also include acquisition of transportation under a contract lease and mobility management programs. Applicants that are eligible to submit traditional Section 5310 projects are private nonprofit organizations or state or local government authorities that are approved by the state to coordinate services for seniors and individuals with disabilities, and to certify that there are no nonprofit organizations readily available in the area to provide the service. State or local governmental authorities applying for a traditional project will need to provide documentation certifying that they meet the requirements to be considered an eligible applicant under the traditional project category. Please note that a traditional project submitted by a non-traditional applicant is considered a non-traditional project. Why is this important? Per the FTA, 55% of available funding must be awarded to traditional projects. This is a requirement that SANDAG tracks during the evaluation and scoring process. So now, if we can go to the next slide, talking about non-traditional Section 5310 projects. So eligible projects include volunteer driver programs, shuttle, ride sharing, and van pooling programs, includes non-emergency medical transportation, as well as transit travel training. Eligible applicants include private nonprofit organizations, state or local governmental authorities, and operators of public transportation. We can go to the next slide. So next up, we're talking about the large urbanized area. So the Section 5310 program funds specialized transportation projects within a large urbanized area, which is defined by the US Census, the most recent being the 2010 census. The urbanized area for the San Diego region is shown in the grade portions on the map on this slide. The map is also available in the coordinated plan and the STGP overview document, and those are available on the STGP webpage. When determining whether your project falls within the urbanized area, assess the areas where the people you are serving live rather than the destination they are traveling to. So if the majority of the people you are serving reside in the large urbanized area, then your project is eligible for Section 5310 funds through SANDAG. If the majority do not, then your project may be eligible through the Section 5310 program for rural and small urbanized areas, which is administered by Caltrans. So next up is more information on eligibility. So there are 5 eligibility criteria which are available on the Cycle 11 webpage. I just reviewed the first eligibility criteria as it relates to applicant eligibility. So I'll jump to the second criteria, which pertains to civil rights and the equitable provision of services. So all transportation services funded through the STGP are required to be provided in a non-discriminatory manner. Applicants are required to submit their organization's civil rights policy, which is also known as non-discrimination policy or Title VI notice to the public. If your organization does not already have one, your organization may develop one based on a template SANDAG provides in the guide to developing a Title VI plan for FTA subrecipients, and that document is available on the STGP webpage. Section 5310 grantees are required to develop or update their Title VI plans every 3 years, which staff will discuss in more detail at the successful applicant workshop after awards have been made. So third, to be eligible, applicants must ensure that at least 80% of the riders or clients are the target population. Incidental users, or those who are not within the target population, may be transported by STGP funded transportation service. Incidental user trips, however, should not be more than 20% of the total passenger trips provided through the STGP funded transportation service. The target population must be given precedence. Personal care attendants are considered neither incidental users nor persons within the target population. Therefore, they do not contribute towards the number of one-way passenger trips provided by a grantee. Fourth, the maximum grant request amounts were increased for Cycle 11, so that's new for Cycle 11. Applicants may now request between $30,000 and $250,000 per project per year, and a maximum of $600,000 per year per funding source. Applicants will only be allowed to submit one application per grant program, but may choose to submit multiple projects per application. Lastly, the coordinated plan identifies transportation needs of seniors, individuals with disabilities, and other transportation disadvantaged populations, provides strategies for meeting those needs, and prioritizes transportation services for funding and implementation. So as I alluded to earlier, to be eligible, projects must be derived from a very high or high priority strategy in the 2020 coordinated plan, which is available online at sandag.org/coordinated plan. SANDAG encourages applicants to read through chapters 5 and 6 of the coordinated plan to gain a better understanding of the regional strategies and determine whether your proposed project or projects align with these priorities. Next slide. So SANDAG will perform a preliminary eligibility review of all submitted projects based on the minimum eligibility requirements we just reviewed. So SANDAG reserves the right to request additional information and or clarification from any applicants, but is not required to do so. Projects that pass the preliminary eligibility review will be given to an external evaluation panel to score. SANDAG will score the quantitative criteria, except for seat utilization, which I will explain a little bit later. Next slide, please. So regarding the evaluation criteria, there are 8 evaluation criteria categories. All project applicants have the same categories. However, there are some differences in the application questions. The organization application is worth up to 30 points, and project applications are worth up to 70 points for a total of 100 possible points. SANDAG encourages applicants to review the evaluation criteria. The SANDAG Board of Directors approved, tailoring their responses accordingly. The evaluation criteria are available on the STGP Cycle 11 webpage. I'm not going to spend time on each evaluation criteria category, but will note in the following slide that the seat utilization performance indicator was changed for Cycle 11. You can go to the next slide. So in prior cycles, staff would score an applicant's seat utilization rate just as it would for other quantitative performance indicators. The seat utilization rate, which is applicable to operating and capital projects, was altered for Cycle 11 as SANDAG recognizes that physical distancing requirements or other public health recommendations due to COVID-19 may necessitate a reduction in the number of shared trips. So for Cycle 11, the evaluator panel, rather than staff, will score an applicant's proposed seat utilization as more of a qualitative indicator. The evaluators will measure the proposed seat utilization for its reasonableness and the applicant's strategies to improve it over time, given COVID-19 constraints. So now that we've covered the STGP program goal and objectives, as well as the eligibility and the evaluation criteria, I'll wrap up this portion with a summary of program requirements. So if we can go to the next slide. So minimum match requirements vary by project type, operating, mobility management, and capital, as well as by funding source. These requirements are shown in the table on this slide and are also available in the overview document. Eligible sources of matching funds may include private funds, in-kind contributions for mobility and operating and mobility management projects only, as well as federal funds, state or local funds, and revenue. However, ineligible sources of matching funds are generally those from the same grant-funded source. So for example, Federal Department of Transportation funds cannot be used as match for Section 5310 projects. Similarly, other Transnet funds cannot be used as match for senior mini grant projects. If your organization chooses to use in-kind contributions as a match source in the proposed budget, the organization will need to identify how the in-kind contributions are being calculated. For example, if your organization plans to use in-kind hours, whether from volunteers or paid employees, the organization will have to justify the hourly rate used in calculating the match amount. So, and the last note I'll mention here is that a cash match amount is required for all vehicle procurement projects. Next slide. So SANDAG administers grant funding on a reimbursement basis, except for vehicle procurement projects. Grantees are required to submit sufficient documentation of all expenses. Grant funds cannot be used to reimburse direct operating costs for vehicles. This includes fuel, tires, oil, vehicle insurance, or vehicle repairs. Instead, SANDAG uses the IRS reimbursement rates to reimburse vehicle expenses on a per mile basis. SANDAG, to reiterate, SANDAG encourages prospective applicants to review the Program Management Plan, or PMP, for a more comprehensive review of eligible uses of funds and other program requirements. We can go to the next slide. Applicants that have implemented a specialized transportation grant through SANDAG in the past 3 years are eligible to receive a past performance adjustment. The applicant's performance in managing its grant or grants over the most recent 12-month period before March 1st will be used to determine whether one or more adjustments is appropriate. SANDAG staff calculates a past performance adjustment using the monitoring checklist, which is found in the PMP. An adjustment can range between 10% and a positive 2%. In prior cycles, an applicant received one past performance adjustment that would be applied to all proposed projects, but new for cycle 11, staff will calculate an average of the performance scores by project type and weighted by project cost, so potentially producing multiple past performance adjustments per applicant. Once the external evaluation panel ranks all proposed projects, staff would then apply one or more adjustments to each proposed project. Applicants who have not had a grant in the past 3 years, however, would not receive an adjustment. If we can go to the next slide. So lastly, due to COVID-19, the application of a past performance adjustment will depend on the timing of the grantee's project and COVID-19. So staff will apply a past performance adjustment to projects completed before March 1st. Staff will modify the past performance adjustment for projects performed before and after March 1st, or not apply a past performance adjustment to projects started after March 1st. So at this time, that concludes the STGP overview portion of the presentation. But before we go on, I'll pause and open it up for a couple of burning questions that you might have. And then we'll, in the agenda, there's time to answer more questions later on. So as a reminder, you can dial *9 if you're calling in, or click the raise hand feature to indicate that you'd like to speak. So if there are any questions at this time.
Zachary, I'm not sure if you saw it in the chat. I did try to instruct Hunter to submit his question in the Q&A. He might not have gotten to that. So he did ask something in the chat.
Okay. No problem. Okay, so we have, it looks here, we have a question from Hunter. If one nonprofit wanted to apply for a non-traditional program and a traditional program, should we submit 2 separate applications, or one combining the two. So you would submit one organization application, and then you would submit multiple project applications, I believe. Hassan, I see that your hand is raised. Did you have a question? Production, can we unmute Hassan?
He is.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. My question was answered.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. So in the interest of time, we'll need to move on to the next item in the agenda. But if there's time for Q&A towards the end of the work, but there'll be time for Q&A towards the end of the workshop, like I just said. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Crystal Ayala, to give a brief overview of the flexible fleets and opportunities for the Specialized Transportation Grant Program. So next slide in, Crystal.
Thank you, Zach, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I just want to take a moment to thank Zach and the grants team for including me in the presentation today. I'm really happy to be sharing an update on our regional vision and our flexible fleet strategy. So as Zach mentioned, my name is Crystal Ayala, and I'm a regional planner with our mobility and innovation team here at SANDAG. I'm also part of the team that has been working on this regional vision, analyzing data, evaluating new technologies, and using what's called a human-centered design approach to develop a new vision for the San Diego region. And so a few weeks ago, we actually presented that vision to our board of directors. It's a vision that'll completely rethink our transportation system and will ultimately serve as the foundation for the 2021 regional plan, which is a blueprint of transportation investments in the region for years to come. So to develop this vision, we've been using the framework of the 5 big moves, as you can see on the slide here. Starting with complete corridors, this envisions a fully connected system of managed lanes and also includes improvements on rural corridors and local streets to ensure there's safe and adequate space for transit, bikes, and pedestrians. The second move is Transit Leap, which envisions a whole new high-speed, high-frequency transit system in the region, nothing like our region has ever seen before. Mobility hubs are places in our communities where multiple modes of transportation would come together and make it easy for you to move around your community without relying on a personal vehicle. And flexible fleets provide on-demand travel options for traveling and connecting us to those mobility hubs. And finally, the next operating system serves as the brain of the transportation system, collecting data from a variety of sources to operate our system more efficiently and to deliver new trip planning tools, making it easy for travelers and visitors to use our transportation system. Now, these strategies are all interrelated. They work together to really help make the entire transportation system work holistically, be much easier to use, safer, and more efficient. And really the goal of the 5 big moves and our regional vision is to provide more convenient transportation options that make it truly competitive with driving. So a critical part of the regional vision is the flexible fleets move. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the lead of the flexible fleet strategy, but it's a strategy that really envisions providing shared, electric, and on-demand services that provide travel options for all ages and all abilities. So as you can see on the slide here, we've defined 5 flexible fleet services, ranging everything from bikes and scooters to on-demand shuttles to drones that deliver our packages. And really the great thing about flexible fleets is that they're so diverse. You can see from here that they vary in the passenger occupancy that they're able to serve. And there's vehicles of all sizes, meaning that it's easy to find the right type of service that best meets your needs. And they allow us to leverage innovative new technologies to try new and fun, affordable ways of moving around. And because they're enabled by technology, it means that these services can adapt to new environments, they can change to cater to different communities, and they're available in an on-demand fashion, making it really easy for travelers to easily reserve or book a vehicle with a click of a button. Now, because of the different services that are available, flexible fleets can really serve all types of communities and operate everywhere in the region. Specific to specialized transportation services, integrating solutions like on-demand rideshare and microtransit may help provide an on-demand option for people who are not served by transit today or may not have access to a personal vehicle. This really provides the independence to run those errands, head to those medical appointments, and get to work. Now, a lot of these services are operated by the private sector, which means that it requires partnerships, but it really provides a great opportunity to design services in partnership with the private sector and other stakeholders by using a community-focused approach. So this means that we're designing services that are responding to a community need. And that might include ensuring that there is an adequate number of accessible vehicles so that people with disabilities and seniors can board the vehicles easily. And also providing options for people who may not have or may not feel comfortable using a smartphone to access these options, as well as options for people who maybe don't have a credit card on hand and can't just easily hail the service. But in addition to partnerships with the private sector, the success of this strategy and our overall regional vision really is only going to be possible through continued collaboration and partnerships with stakeholders like yours, with cities, transit agencies, and nonprofit organizations. And a lot of the organizations and agencies that you represent provide a really critical and important transportation service to our seniors and to our community members that have disabilities. So for this vision to succeed, we need partnerships with stakeholders like all of you. And we hope to continue collaborating with a lot of your organizations through efforts like this one to help implement the vision. But I also just kind of want to take a minute to add that while we're still working on this regional vision and the 2021 regional plan, a lot of work is already underway on flexible fleets. And we're hoping to work on a regional procurement to bring on a bench of flexible fleet technology companies that SANDAG, cities, transit agencies, and nonprofit groups throughout the region can also access and use and leverage to implement on-demand pilots and services. And so the process is still early on, but we will be reaching out to several of you to ensure that we're thinking about how this bench of technology companies is addressing specialized transportation needs. And we hope to continue partnering with all of you to provide accessible on-demand options. All right, so I spent quite a few minutes talking about our flexible fleet strategy and how technology is really integral to that. But we also recognize that technology is evolving at such a rapid pace and completely changing the transportation landscape. So to help provide some insight on potential application of flexible fleets, we've invited 4 technology vendors who will share their technology solutions and will hopefully help you think about how you might integrate on-demand technologies to support specialized transportation services. This is intended to be informational, but for those that are interested in speaking directly with the vendors or learning more about their proposed solution, their contact information has been included as part of these presentation materials and will be posted to the STGP website that Zach mentioned earlier on. So first, we're going to hear from Brian from Hop Skip Drive, an on-demand rideshare company that started by providing services to youth. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Brian, I'm sorry, you're self-muted right now.
Yep, I just realized that, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Yeah, appreciate you having me and giving me the opportunity to speak about Hop Skip Drive and how we're enabling independence and mobility for seniors. So if you want to move on to the next slide, that'd be great. And as Crystal said, interestingly enough, we actually started as a rideshare business for kids to get kids to and from activities. And really what we realized through some of our relationships with a lot of our partners, Denver Regional Council of Governments, very similar to SANDAG being one, is that the amount of care and compassion needed for seniors to help enable their independence is really, really important. And that's what our care drivers are here to do. So essentially, we're like a caregiver on wheels who deliver guaranteed rides whenever and wherever you need. We do have a vast network of these care drivers who are highly vetted, and I'll get into that slide here in a moment. But our technology makes it really, really easy for you to connect with these care drivers, have full transparency and visibility, and make sure that, it's not just technology, but there's a really important human element involved in supporting these seniors or anyone with disabilities as well. So if you go on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about our drivers and their pedigree. So all of our drivers have at least 5 years of caregiving experience, whether that be with seniors or children. And they have to go through a rigorous 15-point certification. That's DOJ, FBI background checks, as well as going through in-person onboards and trainings to understand how to utilize our technology. And really a lot of the sensitivity and trauma-informed care type of trainings, which are really important when you don't know who you're transporting and they might need that extra level of care. So that's been really helpful in just being able to adopt for the drivers and for those seniors to feel very safe, regardless of who's picking them up and where they need to go. You can go into the next slide. So here's a look at what our actual transportation booking software looks like. So it's quite simple. And this is allowing for the independence for a lot of seniors, and we support other aging agencies with the Older Americans Act. So they're going to volunteer, they're going to visit families, members, they're going to the grocery store, haircuts, doctor's appointments, anything that they actually need. You can get guaranteed reserved scheduled rides when you need it, at least 8 hours in advance. It's a very rider-centric model. So you're putting in specific notes and instructions for those drivers to know exactly how to best support those seniors and where they need to go. So really it's set it and forget it. If you need to schedule one trip for one event, or it's a reoccurring event for an appointment, therapy, family visits, whatever it is, it's just one extra click of a button. You'll have a guaranteed ride, and the senior is going to know exactly who that driver is, as well as your organization will. You can go into the next slide. And really where we see is visibility is accountability. So in the rideshare age, you need to have visibility and know where are our passengers, do they feel safe? And everything is time-stamped. You see who your driver is, you see what vehicle they're in. Even if the senior does not have technology to do this, the organization is scheduling these rides for them, and they know exactly who to share with them, who their driver is going to be, and what the expectations are for that trip for drop off and pick off, and this could pick up, and this could be communicated to family members as well, so everybody feels very safe. So this enterprise solution that allows you to schedule rides is very simple whenever you have a transportation need, whether once or twice or a reoccurring trip. You can go ahead, please. And then lastly, we are a technology company. We do connect to a vast network of care drivers with great experience, as I mentioned, but we need to verify all of this. And there still is very much a human element involved in our transportation. We don't want to take that away, not just from the drivers, but how we support the passengers and also how we support all of our clients. So we have a safe ride support team that's like an air traffic control team monitoring these rides at all time for any of your needs. We have very robust technology that's tracking driver behavior from hard braking, hard turns, acceleration, deceleration, collisions, all of those things that we're notified immediately. So I think we're a really great combination of technology, but human element that requires care and compassion for seniors and all of our passengers that we never want to forget about. So that's Hop Skip Drive. It's very simple, and hope to hear more questions from you in the future, and hopefully support the San Diego community a little bit more.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Up next, we have Ben from RideCo, a company that is using on-demand transit software to provide easy and convenient solutions for both riders and operators. Ben, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Crystal. Thanks for inviting us to talk today. I'm excited to get to share a bit about our work with all of you. So as Crystal mentioned, RideCo is an on-demand transit technology company. We partner with communities all around the world to provide app-based on-demand services. While most of our services are in a public transit context, we do operate private corporate shuttles, non-emergency medical transportation, paratransit, and airport shuttle services as well. I'm going to make the assumption that most people have an idea of what on-demand or shared ride services are, and so I want to spend most of the time here talking about our actual projects. and hopefully, paint a picture of what Rideco's approach to working with communities is and the impact our on-demand service has on both our customers as the agency and on the passengers. So if you could go to the next slide. The first project I want to talk about is in San Antonio, Texas. Just hop onto the next slide right away. San Antonio identified a 19 square mile zone that had a few underperforming bus routes. This is a common theme in lower density areas. These buses were operating on long headways with relatively low coverage, about 30 to 60 minutes, and limited connection to a transit hub in the south part of the zone. So for folks who have mobility challenges, right, coverage was, around 60% is very hard to get to a transit line. And so that's sort of the challenges that San Antonio was facing. If you go to the next slide, that would be great. At Rideco, we understand that every project is different. There's different riders, different road networks, and most importantly, different goals. And because of the variability in projects, we have an in-house service planning and modeling team that carefully analyzes each project to determine how we can meet the goals of the agency most effectively. So in this case, San Antonio wanted to improve coverage, improve access to that transit hub to give people more access to sort of the broader San Antonio transit system, and ideally operate at a lower cost per passenger than their fixed bus routes. So our in-house service planning team looked at the area and these goals and developed a hybrid first mile, last mile, and point-to-point model. This means that within the zone, users can travel freely from any point to any other point. You can see all these little blue dots here. Those are the points. And our service model ensures that 100% of residents are within a 5-minute walk of a pickup location. You can see these locations marked, as I said. We call these virtual stops. So we determined that 5-passenger vans would be the most efficient. And the fleet we proposed has the ability to accommodate all different types of passengers. So we can accommodate wheelchair passengers as well as ambulatory riders. We can accommodate users who want to bring kids along. And we can accommodate users who want to have their bike along as well. The service is totally blended, meaning that all of these passengers can share the same vehicle. However, ADA whitelisted passengers or those with mobility challenges can receive door-to-door service, where ambulatory passengers will be directed to that 5-minute walk at the virtual stop. So if you go ahead to the next slide, Crystal. We've been running this service for over a year, and these are the results. Our service was able to capture the entire ridership in the 19 square mile zone, which allowed ViaLink, the agency, to discontinue the fixed routes entirely. Pre-COVID, we were doing more than 650 trips a day, and 40% of those connected into the transit hubs. Wait times were cut to about 12 minutes, right, from that 60 minutes, with onboard times only a few minutes longer than a direct trip. So that becomes very compelling for people who are considering other options like a Uber model or driving their own vehicle. And the service has been very popular. The average rider uses it more than 15 times per month. And collectively, we have a rating of about 4.7 out of 5 stars. Most excitingly, we were able to do this in a very affordable way, actually cutting the costs for the agency by 20%. So the cost per passenger of the on-demand service in San Antonio is $8 pre-fare recovery, where the fixed routes were operating at about $10. So if you could go to the next slide. The second project I want to speak about is Calgary Transit. Yeah, perfect, thank you. So in this case, it was a new development neighborhood that had virtually no access to transit whatsoever. And so the only option to get into the city was a personal vehicle or a more traditional rideshare service like Uber. And Calgary wanted to provide residents of this area access into the city. So they looked to us to provide a strictly first mile, last mile service. And because of that, our planning team took a bit of a different approach, where in San Antonio, users can travel point to point in the zone. In Calgary, we determined that a point to hub model was more appropriate. So what that means is that users can travel from any one of these blue dots in the highlighted zone to either of these red points in the south. But not point to point within the zone. So they can go out of the zone to the transit hub or from the transit hub into the zone, but not within. And this was in line with Calgary Transit's goals. Like San Antonio, this is a blended service with 50% of the vehicles having wheelchair accessible seats. And in terms of booking a wheelchair accessible seat, it's an app-based platform where users just select a wheelchair accessible seat. They receive the exact same quality of service as anybody else. We just make sure that the algorithm directs a wheelchair accessible vehicle to them. If you could go to the next slide. So this project's been a huge success. Overall, we carry about 8 passengers per vehicle revenue hour to and from the transit hubs in the city at a total daily ridership of about 175 people per day, with more than 90% of those rides shared. In order to catch a ride, riders don't need to walk more than 250 feet, and our on-time record is 96%. In this case, that's really important because we're connecting into other transit hubs, and we align our arrival times in those transit hubs to coordinate with the departure times of transit leaving to make sure that people are catching their rides. And so that's sort of a quick overview of a couple of projects that RideCo has worked on. I'd be more than happy to discuss how we can work specifically and get our service planning team thinking about different use cases, whether that's senior shuttles and other mobility questions and use cases in the San Diego area.
Thank you, Ben. Up next, we have Luke from Spare Labs, who will share how they are connecting communities through efficient and on-demand microtransit. Luke?
Thanks, Crystal. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be able to present here today. At a high level, Spare is a technology provider that enables services like on-demand or pre-scheduled, microtransit, specialized services, paratransit, or non-emergency medical transport. Today, we're focused on flexible fleets, and we believe you can think about that in sort of 2 ways. So there's flexible demand, which is different types of demand you would see from riders in your services, as well as flexible supply. So kind of is in the supply of vehicles that you would provide to your riders. And at Spare, we believe having the flexibility on both ends is really crucial for the service to be really successful. And we also know that the flexibility can have a big impact on your operational efficiency. Next slide. Actually, sorry, go back one. So yeah, first we'll talk about kind of flexible demand. And so we often see the desire for an organization to serve multiple different types of customers. This could be school transport, seniors, general public, non-emergency medical transport, specialized services, paratransit, et cetera. And so most of the time, these services are all being served with a different fleet of vehicles because each type of customer requires a different level of service. But with Spare, we're able to combine these different service types of riders onto one vehicle and importantly, still maintain the same unique quality of service being offered for each. Next slide. So for instance, you would rarely see an organization pick up a general public transit customer and then pick up a paratransit rider because these 2 types of riders have very different requirements. So in this example at the top of the page, we see that 2 separate vehicles would probably be needed to pick up these 2 different customers. But with Spare, we're able to use a single vehicle that could pick up, for instance, an ADA paratransit customer from their door. Maybe they book 24 hours in advance by calling into a dispatch center. And then the next trip that the vehicle goes to pick up could be an on-demand microtransit customer. Maybe they had to walk to a virtual stop and they only booked a few minutes prior using a smartphone app. So we can pool these different types of riders together, but still offer different levels of service to each group. And so if your organization right now offers a variety of different services and you are using a different fleet of vehicles for each, with Spare, you could combine that fleet together and still maintain the different service parameters for each of those services you offer. So for instance, you could offer a specialized service where most of the trips are pre-booked and the area those riders can access is maybe very large across the city. And then you could also offer a seniors only transportation service where maybe those seniors need to book the same day. They only get access to maybe 5 or 6 destinations. And so these are 2 very different services, but they can be, share one fleet of vehicles, which we think is really important. Next slide. And then thinking a little bit more on the supply side, Spare has the ability to not just dispatch trips to the vehicles that you may own or operate, but we can seamlessly dispatch trips to other transportation partners that you may have. So for instance, if your dedicated specialized service vehicles are full for a certain time period, we could dispatch extra trips to a partner like a taxi without any manual interaction needed. Of course, maybe the cost per trip would be higher to do that, but it's probably cheaper than needing to purchase additional vehicles only to serve peak demand during small portions of the day. Next slide. And yeah, just to kind of wrap up here, we know that overall between operations and technology, the technology costs are actually quite small. Most of your yearly costs are going to go to things like vehicles, labor, fuel, but we know that the technology you choose is going to have a dramatic impact on how efficient your operations are. So I'd really encourage you to, do your research and think about these two costs together, not individually. And obviously reach out to the technology vendors presenting here today to understand your different options. Next slide. And yeah, that's sort of it for me. Thank you for sparing your time. Happy to connect with any or all of you in the coming weeks. Shoot me an email and would love to have a conversation.
Thank you, Luke. So wrapping up our presentation of flexible fleet technology vendors is Krista from VIA. VIA is a microtransit company that provides options that serve the first last mile, school bus, paratransit, non-emergency medical solutions, and more. So Krista, please tell us about VIA.
Hi, thank you very much. So excited to speak to you today. We're really excited about the potential to help you win an STGP grant. We have a lot of examples of where we're helping cities and agencies achieve the goals that are outlined in this grant, in which we're helping seniors, individuals with disabilities gain access to transit where the transit options are low, where the transit options might not be customized to their physical needs or their times of travel or just simply aren't accessible to them. Go ahead to the next slide, please. If you aren't familiar, wasn't the same next slide I thought. Can you see the next slide? Oh, sorry, go back up. I think we're missing one, that's okay. Just to tell you who we are, if you aren't familiar already, we partner with cities and transit agencies to deploy custom transit services. We are a software provider, a mobility software provider, but we also provide full operations. So if you're looking for a partner to whom you can outsource for a complete turnkey solution, software operations, et cetera, we can do both of those things. And we do for a lot of our partners around the world. We have services deployed in over 100 regions of the world, about 150 partners globally, 10 right here in California, where I am as well, 10 running in California today with several more in process of deploying. And these are regions from quite rural to very densely urban, like the center of LA. I think it's also important to know about VIA. We have 300 engineers that are developing this software that would support your mobility solutions, whether these are on-demand first mile, last mile, or fixed route, paratransit, NEMT, or a combination of all of those things. So now that you've looked at this slide for a long time, I think we all know what we're talking about here when it comes to the on-demand side. We're really focused on helping get single occupancy vehicles off the road and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by having extremely efficient shared rides when that's possible. So we want users to be delighted and give the service a 5-star rating because they love it. We also want to make sure we are maximizing the ability to share and get people there efficiently by making use of every vehicle on the road. I think a really important thing to consider as you look at these different options is how to build a complete transit solution that fits within the context of what exists today. So being able to integrate to the existing fare system, for example, being able to provide an application that isn't just the microtransit portion, if that's what you're doing, but also you can do trip planning from the beginning of your route all the way to the end, even if that includes microtransit plus the fixed line bus, plus a bike share at the other end. But being able to provide this system that's very easy for people to use from end to end, we think is really critical to making these solutions really effective. So we can help you do that, execute it, and plan it. And the next slide, I can show you a couple of different examples where we are working on services that are quite senior specific. Newton, Massachusetts is a senior service, senior and ADA service. A lot of people pre-schedule their service. They want to order it ahead of time, or possibly they have appointments weekly that they want to make sure they arrive by a certain time to get to those appointments. So having those kinds of functionality have been very important in our senior services. We do have a high dial-in rate. People call about 75% of the time in this service. But the technology is still extremely important to make the dispatcher's life quite easy, and be able to still text, SMS the riders or send them an auto call to let them know vehicles are coming. These are all things very specific to these services, used globally, but specific to a senior service that we've seen it are quite important. On the next slide, my last example is in Austin, Texas, where we're deployed across 6 zones in the greater Austin area with 17 wheelchair accessible minibuses. This is also a very highly rated service by the seniors and the wheelchair accessible riders. And importantly, we did help decrease the cost per ride. It's about 50% compared to what the prior dial-a-ride service is. And that's why we're in so many zones now. The initial few zones showed great cost efficiencies. And so they grew the service substantially over time. So I'd just like to close by telling you, we also have very sophisticated tools that can help you simulate the service you want to provide. We'll input the region, the population density, the points of interest, and the output you get will be the number of rides to serve, the number of vehicles you will need, the wait times. And having tools like that enables you to iterate, do planning by looking at how these services will actually work, simulate those actual services ahead of time, and it helps make the whole planning process a lot more efficient. So we'd be thrilled to work with you to simulate service and figure out how it could work in your region of San Diego County. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Krista, and to everyone, all of the flexible fleet technology vendors that joined us. We really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit about your technology solution and help get our prospective grantees thinking about how we could leverage innovations in technology and enable specialized transportation services in the region. So we have a few minutes here for Q&A. This Q&A we'd like to keep specific to the flexible fleet technologies. I see that there's a few questions in the Q&A, and our grants team is compiling answers, and we'll answer those questions live when we come back from our break. I see another question here from Rebecca in the Q&A asking whether presenters offer 24-hour round-the-clock rides. So before I hand it over to some of the vendors, in general, I think there's an opportunity with these vendors to design the service that best meets your need. And so if a 24-hour round-the-clock service is what you're looking for, I think, and I'm speaking for the vendors here, I think they would be happy to work with you in designing the service that would work best for the community group you're trying to serve. Any other comments you'd like to add? Any of the flexible fleet vendors? Awesome.
That's exactly right, Crystal.
Okay, great, thank you. There is a question here also related to who pays the ride fee. Is it the rider, or is the price for riding subsidized by SANDAG through this grant? And so that's another one where it's to be determined based on the service you're trying to design. You could work with some of these vendors to come up with a funding model and partnership model that would best cater to your service type, your use case, we like to say. So that could all be determined, but Zach, anything else to add regarding the ability to subsidize some of these rides with the grant program funding?
Yeah, so an applicant may choose to require rider fees, but is not required to do so from a more SANDAG STGP vantage point. But like you said, Crystal, I would reach out to any of these vendors to see, what works best for your service, your user case.
And again, those use cases not only depend on the community group you're trying to serve, but how big the geography of that area is, whether you're trying to make those connections to a transit station or whether you're trying to provide a more point-to-point service from point A to point B, the number of vehicles that you might need to reach a certain operational efficiency threshold. So it all depends, and I would encourage you to reach out to these flexible fleet technology vendors who can work closely with you to walk through some of those options and what these different service design opportunities might look like for the STGP grant program. Before we move on to the break, though, I do want to see if any people on the phone or who are here joining virtually have any questions that they'd like to ask. You can raise your hand using the toolbox in Zoom, and we will unmute you so you can ask your question live.
And I guess I'll say too that just to reiterate, if you don't have a question right now, but you think of it after the workshop or later, the contact information of the flexible fleet providers who presented today is included in the agenda. So you're more than welcome to contact them offline.
Great. I think, Zach, did you want to take the break? I don't think there's any more.
It sounds like it. All right, so we will break, a quick 5 or so minute break, stretch break if we can go to the next slide. And we'll reconvene around 2:35 for the second part. So see you in a bit. Thank you. All right, it's been about 5 minutes, so we'll reconvene here. And at this time, if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Jenny Russo, who's knows all things grants here at SANDAG, and she'll go over stuff about the logistics of how to apply. So Jenny, if you could take it away.
There we go, I muted myself. Sorry, everybody.
There she is.
So hi, welcome. My name's Jenny Russo. For those of you that are familiar with the Specialized Grant Program, you may have seen me on the contract side. I typically am helping with grant agreements, but I'm in a different role now. So I'm helping Zach manage the Specialized Program. So look forward to working with all of you. So we discussed information that's described in the STGP overview document, as well as a program management plan. Now in this portion of the workshop, I'm going to describe the actual mechanics of applying. So let's start by going back to the Cycle 11 webpage materials, as you'll see on this slide. The first heading, Common Documents, refers to materials that are applicable to both funding sources. Forms only need to be completed once and submitted under one or both of the funding sources. They include the resolution, the applicant checklist and signature form, and the organization application. More on the resolution and application in the next slide. Next slide, please. On the resolution template, so STGP projects must comply with Board Policy 35, which is the competitive grant program procedures. Per the policy, an applicant must submit a resolution from its governing body that commits to providing the amount of matching funds set forth in the application if awarded funding. An approved resolution also authorizes the applicant's staff to accept the grant funding and execute a grant agreement with SANDAG if awarded funding. SANDAG encourages applicants to use the online template provided, where you can indicate the request and the amount of matching funds. Next slide, please. Now for a few notes on the organization application. First, Section 5310 applicants need to provide the organization's DUNS number or Dun & Bradstreet number in order to be eligible for federal funds. If your organization does not already have a DUNS number, you will need to apply for and obtain the 9-digit identifier online, and this typically takes a few business days. Second, for both funding sources, an applicant is required to submit letters of support if it coordinates with one or more agencies for full or partial provision of specialized transportation service. The letters of support should come from the partner agency or agencies with which it coordinates. Next slide, please. Both Senior Mini Grant and Section 5310 applicants are required to submit 2 public contract code forms. All other forms in the required forms document are available on the STGP Cycle 11 webpage, and they're only for Section 5310 applicants. Please note that these forms are required during your application submission. Additional forms are required for projects once they're awarded funding. These required forms are available on the STGP webpage and will be included as part of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. Here are some general notes and tips for the organization and project applications. All project applications have the same categories, though there are differences in application questions depending on the project type. The applications are fillable PDFs, which means your responses need to be concise and fit in the spaces provided. All responses are worth up to 5 points. Make sure you're using the appropriate scope, schedule, and budget sheet, as well as other attachments based on the project type. And lastly, make sure your responses are consistent throughout the application materials that you submit. For example, some information contained in the application checklist and signature page, project application, and resolution should all match. Any inconsistent information may negatively impact your total score. Next slide, please. The project scope, schedule, and budget is combined into one sheet for mobility management and operating projects. As such, there's a lot of information compacted onto this sheet, which makes it even more important that your responses, including the project description and deliverables, are clear and concise. Also, including deliverables that are measurable, achievable, and aligned with the STGP goal and objectives is recommended, especially since the scope, schedule, and budget page will be inserted into the grant agreement if the project is awarded funding. Finally, please note that there are detailed instructions in the yellow comment boxes, so SANDAG encourages applicants to consult these resources. Next slide, please. The Capital Project Performance Indicators Worksheet is a tab included with the capital budget form, which I'll discuss in the next few slides. Instructions are included on the Excel worksheet. Each row represents a vehicle for which your organization is requesting funding. When you fill in the proposed service levels for each vehicle for columns A through F, the Excel spreadsheet will auto-calculate the proposed seat utilization in column G. Please note that the Performance Indicators worksheet will be inserted into the grant agreement for the vehicle or vehicles that are awarded funding. As a reminder, seat utilization will be treated as a qualitative indicator and scored by external evaluators rather than SANDAG staff for cycle 11. Next slide, please. SANDAG offers Class A, B, C, D, and V vehicles through the STGP. SANDAG uses the CALAC Purchasing Cooperative to procure new vehicles. SANDAG encourages applicants to research vehicle types to determine the appropriate vehicles for your organization and transportation program. Research may include visiting CALAC's website or reaching out to vehicle vendors. Next slide, please. For each vehicle class type offered, SANDAG has developed a vehicle selection and budgeting tool. The tool is designed to help applicants select the appropriate vehicle for their transportation program and build a budget based on factors that affect vehicle pricing, including model, specifications, options, sales tax, fees, etc. Instructions for using the tool are included in the worksheet. On the first tab, applicants select the vehicle type and desired options using drop-down menus. There is space to list non-published options, though applicants should keep in mind that their organization will be responsible for paying 100% of the cost for non-published options. The second tab shows all available vehicles through the current purchasing cooperative and includes pricing for the vehicles in all options adjusted for inflation. Please note that the prices and offerings are based on the most recently published purchasing schedule available through CALAC, which is subject to change. On this tab, applicants are prompted to select a vehicle based on best value. Applicants may consider the following when selecting a vehicle: past performance information, such as including if vehicles are vendors, special features of the specific vehicle required for effective program performance, warranty considerations, if any, maintenance or inventory considerations, if any, proposed delivery date, and lastly, price. Based on your vehicle selection, the third tab will pre-populate with the price of the selected vehicle and calculate the 80-20 split between what is eligible to be supported by a Section 5310 grant, 80% of the cost, and the minimum required match, 20% of the cost. The vehicle selection tool is not the budget though, but that's coming up next. Next slide, please. The capital project budget is a separate worksheet because an applicant may request more than one type of vehicle or the same vehicle with different options, or may propose a higher match than is required. The budget worksheet allows applicants to list all of the vehicles for which they are requesting funds. The worksheet includes instructions. Next sheet, please. Per the Section 5310 program and Buy America requirements, the FTA requires completion of an in-plant inspection and resident inspector's report when more than 10 vehicles of the same model that are not unmodified vans are purchased. Sandag estimates the cost to be $5,000, which would be less than 1% of the total procurement cost. Since Buy America requirements prohibit use of federal grant funds to cover these costs, they would be paid in extra matching funds by the applicant. New for Cycle 11, the capital budget form indicates whether a resident inspector's report is needed and the total cost based on the number and types of vehicles selected. Next slide, please. Here is the application submission timeline. Within about a month, Sandag will post instructions on how to submit applications electronically via a portal. Following that, the electronic submission portal will open on October 16th. While the call is open, Sandag will compile questions, periodically posting responses to an FAQ page on the Cycle 11 webpage. Applicant questions must be received by the end of the day on October 23rd, and Sandag will post the last response on October 26th. The deadline for applications is 4 p.m. on October 30th, and late submittals will not be accepted. So, what can applicants expect after October 30th? Next slide. In November and December, Sandag anticipates convening an evaluation panel to score and rank applications. Those scores undergo a peer review process to ensure accuracy. Then in early 2021, staff anticipates presenting the funding recommendations to advisory committees, working groups, the Transportation Committee, and finally to the Board of Directors. If your organization's project was awarded, then it will start no sooner than July 1st, 2021. Sandag anticipates vehicle deliveries to occur in 2022. Next slide, please. Speaking of vehicles, we'll now turn to the vehicle demonstration portion of the workshop. Since having an in-person vehicle demonstration is not possible due to COVID, Sandag had to adapt to a remote format with the vehicle vendor assistance. In the agenda, there are links to videos or other resources the vendors provided that hopefully help your organization visualize the vehicles and specifications. Additionally, representatives from the 3 vendors through CalAct, which are A to Z Bus Sales, Creative Bus Sales, and RO Bus Sales, were gracious enough to join us for this workshop. So we'll turn over to them for a quick presentation on their respective agencies, starting with A to Z Bus. Take it away, Cole.
All right. Hi, I'm Cole Crockett with A to Z Bus Sales. I'd like to thank the folks at Sandag for giving us this opportunity to connect with you today. I'd also like to thank you, the members, for taking time to attend this event. Lastly, I'd like to thank those of you who have chosen to work with A to Z over these past few years. We've built some amazing relationships and delivered great vehicles during this time. I want to tell you a little bit about A to Z Bus, and then we'll talk shop on vehicles. A to Z Bus Sales has been providing safe and reliable transportation solutions.
If we can go to the next 2 slides, please. There we go. Go ahead, Cole.
A to Z Bus Sales has been, thank you, Zach, I appreciate that. A to Z Bus Sales has been providing safe and reliable transportation solutions for over 45 years. Additionally, we are the closest dealer servicing Sandag applicants. In 1976, our founder, George Tillery, opened Arizona Bus Sales, which started it all. In the early 80s, he moved the business to California and gained the Bluebird school bus franchise. In the 90s, A to Z also established itself in Hawaii, supplying the school bus contractors and commercial shuttle bus companies with safe and reliable transportation solutions. There are 2 major driving forces that set us apart from the rest. Next slide, please. First, A to Z Bus Sales is driven by a set of core values that guide all employee owners in the same direction towards excellence. We serve God by serving others. We build open and honest relationships. We stand for customer service excellence. We have passion for our work, and we have fun. It's these core values that drive all of our employee owners in the same direction towards excellence. Next slide, please. Which brings me to our second driver. A to Z Bus Sales is 100% employee owned, which means every step of the way, no matter what department you are dealing with at A to Z, you are working with an owner of the company, which also means each person you come in contact with has a vested interest in your satisfaction. Next slide, please. From minivans to full-size vans and small and large cutaway shuttles, we are sure to have just the right vehicle for you, and most are available with gas, diesel, CNG, propane, and even electric powertrains. Class A, B, and C, Glavelle Universal. The Universal is the perfect balance of safety and durability. The passenger compartment is surrounded by a fully welded aluminized steel structure. Standard 5/8 inch marine grade plywood flooring, stainless steel exterior screws, and a fully undercoated chassis protects the bus from the most extreme conditions. Rosco rear vision backup camera and 36-inch by 36-inch windows with tempered safety glass make the Universal one of the safest buses on the road. The laminated straight sidewalls and a one-piece fiberglass front and rear cap make the Universal as desirable as it is durable. If dependability and safety are your top priority, the new Universal by Glavelle is exactly what you are looking for. Next slide, please. Oh, one more slide, please. Sorry about that. Perfect. So the previous one was, okay, perfect. Class B, Glavelle Commute. The Glavelle Commute is built on the Ford Transit chassis platform and is definitely our biggest up-and-comer. As fleets find that sweet spot between a more compact exterior package with a big interior feel. In addition, the wide entry door and deep entry steps, along with a wide aisle and plenty of headroom, make the Commute the most spacious shuttle bus in its class. Couple all that with excellent gas mileage, smaller turning radius, and great driver comforts, and it's easy to see why many fleets are transitioning to this awesome bus. I'm confusing my slide flipper with my hand motion, so I apologize about that. Leave it here if you would, please, and we'll talk about the Class V Ford Transit by NorCal Vans. The Ford Transit van has taken the transportation world by storm over the past several years, and there's no question why. As mentioned earlier with the Glavelle Commute, the Transit chassis gets excellent fuel economy, is comfortable to drive, and is capable of navigating narrower passageways. NorCal Vans has been A to Z's transit upfitter partner for many years now. There's practically no limit to the configurations that can be constructed in a NorCal van. Whether you require CDL or non-CDL capacities, the NorCal van is definitely worth taking a look at. Now, one very important topic to cover while on this model is how the vehicle is ordered from Ford prior to upfit. NorCal Vans begins with a passenger version of the Ford Transit van, which means it has all Ford original equipment in the interior, as well as the all-important side curtain airbags. Many competing upfitters will begin with a stripped cargo version of the van in an effort to save costs and lower the price point to give the appearance of low bid. But a lot is compromised for that position. No corners are cut with NorCal Vans and A to Z because safety is always first for us. Next slide, please. Class D, Braun Ability Dodge Caravan. The Braun Ability Dodge Grand Caravan has stood the test of time due to its great reliability. This low-floor minivan is a great choice for those seeking a smaller capacity vehicle for one-off routes or even supervisor units. Next slide, please. Let's talk about COVID-19 for just a quick second. A to Z is also very prepared to help you equip your new purchases as well as your existing fleet. We offer a full line of personal protection equipment and services to help you protect your drivers and passengers during these unprecedented times. Next slide, please. A to Z Bus Sales has been a trusted partner of CalAct for 20 years and look forward to continuing to support Sandag through this contract. If there is anything we can do for you, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you and God bless.
Wow, well, thank you so much, Cole, for your presentation. At this time, we'll go on to Creative Bus Sales.
Thank you very much, Zach. It's great to be here on this call with you guys. Just a few short slides to go over with you. Creative Bus Sales is a family-owned business since 1980. We are the largest bus dealership in the country with 18 locations nationwide. The importance of this is that we have tremendous purchasing leverage and buying power, which relates to lower price vehicles for you. We have a very strong local customer base in San Diego. We serve agencies proudly such as MTS, North County Transit, FACT, City of Carlsbad, Imperial County, and many others, and many that are on this call. We thank you very much for your business. Next slide, please. Our facility in Southern California is in Chino. It's a newer facility for us. It's a full service with parts, service, and warranty. Many of our vehicles are registered and delivered from this location. Next slide, please. So these are our main products that we will be serving and providing to customers of Sandag. So for the Class A, B, and C, it would be the StarCraft, the Star Trans, and the Eldorado National. They're available on the Ford Transit and the E350 and the E450 chassis. We also have Chevy 3500 and 4500 chassis. We equip these with side or rear lifts and with multiple wheelchair configurations. The next vehicle is the Braun Enervan. It's a low floor minivan converted to accommodate 2 wheelchair positions. It's got a side ramp that can either fold out or slide out from underneath the vehicle. We have these in stock and ready for quick delivery. I believe we have over 50 of these units in our yard right now as we speak. We also have a Ford Transit van equipped with a side or rear lift with multiple wheelchair configurations. One nice thing about us being in Southern California and having a huge presence in San Diego is if you would like to see any of these vehicles and you're open to having visitors, just let us know, and Dawn or myself can definitely come down to your location with this vehicle and show you the vehicle. You can try loading wheelchair passengers in and out, see how your ambulatory passengers like it, and see how your drivers and management team like the vehicle as well. So that's also very available to you. Next slide, please. We also offer PPE equipment. From Aeroclave, we have the RDS 3110T system, which is an automated system to deliver vital oxide to decontaminate your vehicles. We have multiple kinds of driver barriers. We also have a soft barrier for vans, for like the Braun Enervan. If you want to encapsulate the driver and the co-pilot and provide protection for the driver and the passengers, we have that available. And we also have seat barriers from Friedman available. Next slide, please. So we're experts in vehicle specifications, from multiple wheelchairs to fuels, to maximizing your seating capacity, to ADA compliance, and low floor and standard floor options. Don White and I have been working with Creative Bus Sales for over 20 years. Don is my mentor, and he's done an excellent job of teaching me how to configure vehicles. And Don's also available, and he's also on this call too to answer any questions. And that's it from us, Zach.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve, and Don for joining us on the call. At this time, we'll go over to Greg, if you're there, with RO Bus Sales. RO Bus Sales. Thank you.
And I am. How are you?
Great.
Thank you for having us and for allowing us to be a part of this presentation as well. We at RO Bus Sales have been providing quality bus service and mobility for the last 20 years. We have a variety of vendors and partners both in Northern Nevada, Southern Nevada, and California. We've been in California for the last 4 years and have developed some great partnerships. Next slide, please. Our facility, our main facility is in Nevada, in Southern Nevada, but we also have facilities and manufacturers in Southern California. Next slide, please. Currently, we only have one vehicle on the CAL Act, which is the Class V Transit through Sunset Ford, which is one of our manufacturers in Southern California. The Transit is a 2020 to 2021 model that lists a few, and well, let's see, it has just a few engine types, basically, and some other available options that we will get onto on the next slide, like the shift and step. Next slide, please. The shift and step.
And now you have a side entrance van with a side lift.
The shift and step allows you to virtually move the lift.
I'm on this call. Sorry.
Oh, did you mean to call me?
Virtually allows you to move the lift out of the way of your the passengers that allow them to personally gain entrance into the vehicle. Next slide, please. Abilitrax. Abilitrax is a customizable flooring system that allows you to customize your floor for whatever your needs are. It is a very hands-on system that allows you to configure your seating system for whatever your needs are for that particular day. So virtually, you can change your floor plan very easily from 5 to 7 passengers or for whatever your needs are. Next slide. We also offer a variety of personal protection. We also have the transit driver barriers, passenger sneeze guards, and social distancing band. One thing I'd like to say about our Class V transit van is the interior is an all ABS interior that has a non-absorbent antibacterial surface, and we're one of the only manufacturers and dealers that has that particular interior. I made, as one of the last vendors, I made our presentation kind of short and sweet because I know you've been on this for a while. I appreciate your attention. Any calls or questions, please feel free to reach out to us at RO Bus Sales. We will be happy to assist you and with whatever your needs are. Again, thank you for allowing RO Bus Sales to be a part of this. We're very excited to be with Sandag. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you threw that in at the last minute.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate you and Cole and Don and Steve for being here today and joining us in this virtual environment and virtual vehicle demonstration in lieu of the actual in-person one. So at this time, we'll go to the Q&A and hear from you. You heard us talk for a while. Now we get to hear from you. So I'm going to ask that the vendors stick around if they're able for the Q&A portion of the workshop. We've received some questions in the Q&A box, but let's start with those joining by phone. If you have a question you're calling in, dial *9 to indicate you'd like to speak, and we'll unmute you. And then after that, we'll go on to those submitted questions via the chat. So are there any questions or hand raised for those that are calling in at this time? Okay, I don't see any hand raised. Production, there aren't any hands raised, correct?
Correct, I don't see any either.
Okay, all right. So next, we'll go to some questions that were received via the Q&A box. I'm gonna pull them up, and I guess I can begin with some of these questions. So if it says here, one of the questions is, one nonprofit wanted to apply for a non-traditional program and a traditional program, should we submit 2 separate applications or combine the 2? So the response is a nonprofit organization interested in applying for a non-traditional project and traditional project should submit 2 project applications, but only 1 organization application. I should say too that all these questions that we've received through the Q&A chat box will compile and then post on the FAQ page on the STGP Cycle 11 webpage. All right. The next question are rural areas of the county eligible for the 5310 program? So like if a majority of the clients served by an applicant's proposed project are in the urbanized area of San Diego County, that again is defined by the census, then the project is eligible for Section 5310 funding through SANDAG. If it is not, if the majority are not, then to reiterate, that would be something through the Section 5310 program that Caltrans administers. We have now another question here, and it's talking about mention of a minimum grant request amount. So just to reiterate, the minimum grant request amount is $30,000 per proposed project. And even though it wasn't asked, I'll state for the record here that the maximum is $250,000 per proposed project. Next up, we have another question, which I think we already covered. Do any of the flexible fleet technology vendors offer 24-hour round-the-clock rides? I think we already covered that. So I'll go to the next question, which is who pays the rides fee? Is it the rider or subsidized by the SANDAG through the grant? As I alluded to earlier in the presentation, an applicant may choose to ask riders for donated fees to help generate revenue, but is not required to do so. So there's an option in the applicant budget that has an option for rider fees that you can budget, but you're not required to do so. I see those are the questions that I have received so far that I see. We have one person that has raised their hand. I see Lisa. Production, maybe you could unmute Lisa.
That's me, thank you. Do you guys mind putting the slide up that had the timeline and the dates again, please? For the application process?
Yeah. Production, could you go back a couple slides? It would be right before A to Z bus sales, I believe. One more behind that.
Okay.
And again, to reiterate, this slide deck will be posted after the workshop to the STGP Cycle 11 webpage. And this information is also in the STGP overview document, much of it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Zach, we have a question here from Marcy asking if you could go over the differences between traditional and non-traditional projects again.
Sure. So if we can go back a couple of slides, maybe that'll help to match what I'm saying. So if we can go back to, I believe it is, I believe it's slide 9. Yep, so traditional, so this pertains only to the Section 5310 program. The whole traditional, non-traditional categorization does not apply to the senior mini grant program. So if you're interested in applying for that program, you don't even need to worry about that. For the Section 5310 program, the traditional Section 5310 applicants are private nonprofit organizations and state or local governmental authorities. And there's a condition here that are approved by the state to coordinate services for seniors and individuals with disabilities, and B, certify that there are no nonprofit organizations readily available in the area to provide the service. And these conditions are per the FTA, which provides the Section 5310 funding. And so eligible projects within this category: vehicle procurement, support equipment, intelligent transportation projects, and contract transportation services, as well as mobility management and coordination programs. So that's within the bucket of traditional Section 5310. And then if we go to the next slide, non-traditional is still, again, private nonprofit organizations, state or local governmental authorities, and then operators of public transit. But the big difference here is the eligible project type. So volunteer driver programs, shuttle, ride sharing, and van pool programs, non-emergency medical transportation, as well as transit travel training are all eligible projects more in the non-traditional Section 5310 category. And just to reiterate that we divvy up per FTA requirements the funding available, so that 55% of funding must be for traditional Section 5310 projects, and then the remainder is for non-traditional. I hope that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that helped to clarify a little bit of the non-traditional and traditional categories.
There's also another question here from Betsy, asking whether the rural areas of the county are eligible for the senior mini grant. And then the second part of that question is whether that senior mini grant can be used to fund a volunteer rider driver program.
Okay, so the first part is, so the rural urban distinction is just for the Section 5310 program. So if you want to apply through the Section 5310 program and through SANDAG, you have to ensure that a majority of the riders that you wish to serve are in the urbanized areas of San Diego County. The distinction with the senior mini grant is the senior mini grant is for the entire county, from Escondido to Bonsall to Borrego Springs down to Chula Vista. So, and there's no distinction regarding urban or rural. So if you would like to apply through the 5310 program and if majority are not in the urbanized area, then again, I would refer you to Caltrans and their call for projects because they handle that through their Section 5310 program.
And the second part of that question was whether they could use senior mini grant funding to fund a volunteer rider or driver program. Is that one of the eligible projects?
Yep, that would be definitely an eligible project. Yep.
And one other question has come in from Pamela, asking about the differentiation between very high and high priorities.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. So both very high and high priority strategies are part of the eligibility criteria for funding. And so any of those projects or rather priorities listed in the coordinated plan, if you address those in your application, you would be eligible for funding. So the high priority, the distinction between high priority and very high priority, and high priority is based on stakeholder engagement through the coordinated plan outreach process. But for the application purposes, you can use any of those strategies in either the high or very high priority categories. let's see here. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other questions on the Q&A, but at any point, feel free to type any questions in. And again, the PowerPoint and the responses that we provide today will be compiled and posted on the FAQ page on the SANDAG STGP Cycle 11 webpage.
A question from Marcy has come in, Zach, in the Q&A, asking if you could please go over the coordination with other agencies, strategies, and evaluations.
Sure. So I believe if you are planning to coordinate with another service agency for the full or partial provision of your proposed project, then you would be required to submit a letter of coordination that just says that you're both in sync and applying for the grant funding jointly and support each other. I hope that sort of answers your question, Marcy.
Thank you, Zach. And then another question asking if SANDAG staff is available to provide technical assistance to individual agency applicants.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that all information that we provide is the same and for all applicants, and so everyone has equal access. So we will be posting, have questions, and then we'll post responses on the FAQ webpage, on the Cycle 11 webpage. But during the grant term, we definitely will be able to provide technical assistance. And then if you are awarded funding, we will host a successful applicant workshop, which will go more in depth into the program requirements and Title VI plans and other things that are relevant to the grant program.
Thank you, Zach. One other question from Betsy asking who the best contact for the senior mini grant may be and website where we can access more information on the senior mini grant and the other STGP resources you've gone over today.
Yeah, so the Specialized Transportation Grant Program webpage is a one-stop shop for all things senior mini grant and Section 5310. So it is a great resource for both funding sources. So again, it's www.sandag.org/STGP Cycle 11. And then the main web page for the Specialized Transportation Grant Program is www.sandag.org/STGP. So let's see. I think those are the questions so far. Are there any others that you all on the workshop might have? Okay. Well, hearing none, unless there's a last minute question, but hearing none, I think we can conclude a little bit early for the workshop. I will say that if you have further questions, that you can always email SANDAG at grantsdistribution@sandag.org. If you have further questions regarding for the flexible fleet providers and the vehicle vendors, you can also email them. And I think that about covers it. And I again, thank you for your interest in the Specialized Transportation Grant Program. And I wish you all the best as you apply and craft your applications, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.